Hi, and welcome to the Route to CISO Byte-Size podcast. I'm your host, Kris Rides, and in these bite-sized episodes, we'll be speaking to experienced cybersecurity hiring managers. We'll be asking their advice on how you can stand out from the crowd to make the career moves you desire. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Route to CISO podcast. I'm your host, Kris Rides, and we're recording another bite-sized episode. I'm excited to have Alexis Gerst with me from Defense Unicorns. Alexis, welcome.
Hey, Kris. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. This is so funny. I love how we end up meeting different people in the industry. Literally, we end up sitting randomly at the same table. I come and join the Defense Unicorns table in Nashville. Everybody's picking bits of food. We were out one evening, and I just jumped on the table, and we ended up chatting. And here we are now. You're a guest on my podcast.
Yeah, this has been great.
Thank you.
Excited to chat with you. And this is a topic that I'm very passionate about and have been keeping close tabs on as it emerges with the DRPK IT worker threat, particularly towards remote companies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. We're in interesting times right now. There is obviously the big pull back into the office, but there's so many companies that are still doing remote. There's AI that are increasing all of these applications. I'm sure we'll talk about because it has an influence on how some of these people manage to get through. But yeah, we're talking today about North Korea and some of the ways that they're trying to put in these fake cybersecurity actors. And I know there's been some quite big names sort of publicizing how much of that sort of stuff's been happening. So I think to start off with, could you give us a bit of an overview of, I know the FBI have been putting out some different bits of information. I would love a little bit of an overview for anybody that doesn't know the background behind this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the FBI issued an advisory early last year. This threat is increasing and we've seen more of it. So essentially what it is there are remote workers from North Korea that are posing fraudulently as other candidates, basically getting hired in remote roles by these companies, usually misrepresenting their identity, potentially using filters or, just kind of keeping their real identity under wraps or using what technology they need to kind of get by and do the work that's required of the role. And their main objective is to cash in on those tech salaries. So I work in the defense industry. This is happening in the defense industry, or we're starting to see it more, but really across tech companies in the US that are paying those high tech salaries anywhere from $80,000 all the way up to $300,000 plus, and they're cashing in on these salaries. And then this money is being funneled back into billions of dollars is being funneled into the North Korean weapons program. So obviously, as a defense contractor, I have a lot of concerns with that from both the defense side and the access to data that they might be able to get if they successfully infiltrate these companies. But also, we don't want our US dollars being funneled back into funneling nuclear weapons programs in countries that aren't necessarily allied with us.
Yes, no thanks. I mean, we don't really want to fund that stuff anyway, right? Anywhere else outside of our own country. But yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's interesting because I always thought about it being more of a data sort of theft play, infiltration play, and less about the actual money. But, the US dollar is very strong compared to what they need probably to earn in North Korea. That's a lot of money. And you don't think of it as being a more of a state actor type thing rather than an individual just trying to make more money or scam people. It's actually being done from a state end. So that's interesting. I think, there was somebody that posted something on LinkedIn recently. Was it Amazon or from somewhere?
There was a recent NBC article that Amazon had shared about they've seen a lot of these trends because they're such a big company. They filter so many resumes, they hire so many people. They've been able to kind of analyze this and trends that they're seeing because of that access to the large trends and data that they have. So that NBC article, they disclosed that they had over 1,800 suspected DRPK applications since April of 2024. So in about a little over a year and a half, they've seen a 27% quarterly increase, like quarter over quarter. It's just increasing. I actually, 2 weeks ago, before we chatted again, I was filtering resumes for a security analyst role that I'm hiring for. And it was crazy the amount of applications in there that were clearly fake, but looked impressive on the surface. So we'll kind of talk into like key indicators to look for in a minute. But some of those, it was like, okay, so this is probably not a legitimate person. And our recruiter was also really in tune because he sees so many of these applications, like what the immediate red flags were to look for. But yeah, it's definitely, since the last role that I hired for was a little over a year ago. From that point, filtering resumes to this point, it's just a night and day market difference in the increase of prevalence.
Yeah, well, let's talk through that, because I find this very interesting. It's something that we didn't see too much in the initially, and not talking specifically about what we're seeing now with North Korea, but previously I had a lot of friends that have recruitment companies, a lot of them outside of cybersecurity, but in tech. And I know there were certain parts where they were seeing a lot of applications where people were, the person was interviewing and doing the job and doing the interview and actually getting the job, and then somebody else was coming and actually doing the work, right? So that we saw that for a few years, probably outside of cybersecurity, and I think they got away with a lot of that, background checks and other things, but I'm sure there were some issues with that. I think in the whole time we've only been suspicious about something like that once since 2012 of doing it, but I've seen friends that have had it a lot more common. So what are we seeing now, and how are you identifying, and what's the differences, I guess?
Yeah, so identity verification is a big piece, right? There's multiple ways that you can do that, and particularly for CISOs, like tracking this risk, making sure your recruiters are on board and aware of it. And then everybody in the interview process is also aware of it. So one thing that we absolutely saw last year was somebody showed up to the first round, they talked to the recruiter, they crushed it. Like, they had done their research on the company, they were fully aligned. The recruiter was like, yes, send this person forward. And then in the technical interview, it was an engineering role, so they were doing actual coding exercises and live things like that. It was a completely different person that showed up to that interview. And one of the engineers doing the interview kind of raised his hand to the recruiter and said, hey, the name of this person that's like on their GitHub profile doesn't match the name that's on the applicant resume. Like, can you just pop in here and see if this is the same person that you interviewed? And the interview, or the recruiter came in and was like, no, that is a different person. So even just like passing the culture fit and then the technical interview, we had somebody completely different showing up. So that's definitely something to be aware of. So there's several different ways to do identity verification. There's technical platforms out here now that are actually doing like deep fake video and audio detection. They're doing like biometric imprinting to make sure it's the same person showing up from the first interview to the last interview, and then even on day one when they show up to start onboarding. You can do IDs. There's obviously different, you can do passport, government issued ID, whatever your company requires. There's I-9 verification that happens. Sometimes with remote companies, though, I-9 verification is actually outsourced. So even though they're going and verifying with somebody, they might have been sending somebody else to do that. And someone different is still showing up with the IT system access on day one. So that's definitely something to pay attention to, and that it's consistent throughout the interview process. And then looking out for those technical red flags. So the accounts that they're accessing, if you're doing like a Google Doc or something like that, to share the technical and engineering prompts with them for the exercises. You can see who's accessing that document and what account they're using. Different things like that to pay attention to. There's also some red flags in like behavioral monitoring. So we like to say, get to know them a little bit, just break the ice before the interview starts, get to know where they're at. Oh, you're in Seattle. What are your favorite restaurants to eat at there? And you can kind of throw them off too if they're not prepared for something like that. You can look out for some of those inconsistency. Some other things that seem really minor, but can also be something to pay attention to is like, what do the outlets in their background look like? If they're sharing their screen, does the time zone on their screen match where they say they're at? Just little things like that, inconsistencies, looking for VPN icons to see if they're using a VPN, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it could also point out to they're masking their location if it's not adding up. So just kind of taking into account all of those different indicators and red flags to make sure that their story is consistent, and that they do seem like a legitimate person.
Yeah, that's there's so many different little bits you've got to keep in mind. But I guess it's the build up of the little things that make you more certain that, okay, this is okay, this is right. Now I'm getting like, how do you then handle the fact that if you think that that's the case, like how do you test it? Do you sort of speak to them about it, or is it like, I think this person's like too many red flags anyway. Let's just pass on this and move on. Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, so typically, like with our company, we have a competitive enough talent market that it's pretty easy to say like, okay, once we start accumulating a few red flags, we talk to some of the different people involved. If it's clear that this person's misrepresenting themselves in any way, then they usually just get tossed out, and we move on to the next candidate. But yeah, that's definitely something to have a conversation with your recruiting team about and kind of determine how are you going to handle these going forward. And it might be different for every company too.
Yeah, and I'm interested in only because I've seen some strange stuff on LinkedIn recently, and I'm wondering whether it's almost like a harvesting platform where people are harvesting candidates to sort of then look at resumes and stuff. I noticed a cybersecurity recruitment company that had a lot of jobs advertised. The description of the company was funny. They're a cybersecurity AI platform. The description, cybersecurity recruiting AI platform. The company's description is, we are a recruitment company that use AI. The job adverts say we are not a recruitment company. We're an AI company that isn't recruiting. We're using the latest tools to match candidates. Their adverts are for things like, they have cybersecurity adverts, but they have things like personal assistant, and like stuff that's absolutely not cybersecurity, and yet they're called cyber blah blah blah. They have no employees on LinkedIn, and maybe I'll publish this. I'll when we do this, when we push this out, maybe I'll publish a link to the company. But they've got no employees associated to the company, and they've just got a whole bunch of LinkedIn adverts out. And that, it was so suspicious when I saw it. It was one of my consultants said to me, "Hey, Kris, have you seen this company? I've never heard of them. Like, they sound like they should be a competitor, but they say they're not a recruitment company, but they do AI recruitment using AI for security people. Very strange." Is that how these people are kind of building like the resumes, or like, is that something completely different?
That might be something completely different. A lot of what we see in these fraudulent roles is they're literally just taking LinkedIn profiles or dropping links to LinkedIn profiles for somebody else. Like, they're just stealing their identity and their online persona via LinkedIn. They're stealing their resumes and using those and basically pretending to pass them off as their own. We're also seeing, like, we've had people catch LinkedIn profiles that were in a complete impersonation. Like, it was another profile that was created with their name, found their picture online, and was created in an attempt to be them. Thankfully, we were able to report it, get it taken down, and take control of it. But that's very common, is you'll see resumes that are actually legit, actually match a real person, but the person behind the actual application is not the person that is being represented on the resume and the LinkedIn profile. That's probably one of the most common ways that these seem to get through. Same thing with like templated or impersonated GitHub profiles. That's another one that we see with a lot of technical roles as well. So that's something to be wary of. One of the other kind of like resume indicators that is kind of a glaring flashing red flag or a rotating light for us is the resumes where they just have big company name after big company name. Like, they went from Microsoft to Amazon to Boeing to Lockheed Martin, or just all these big companies. Like, that's not typical. Maybe it could be there, but like, look into that experience a little bit further, or maybe the timeline of the experience and the technology that they're working with does not match up with the actual technology timeline. And when things started to become developed and more prevalent, is another red flag to look for on resumes.
It's really funny you mentioned that, because I think this was a couple of years ago now. I all of a sudden, my employee count went up by one, and I was like, I've not hired anybody, right? We're a small company, and I was like, Tyro Security, let me check who our employees are on LinkedIn, and found this random person had added that they worked for us. And so I dropped him a message, and I was like, hey, I didn't know I'd suddenly gained another employee. I'm not thinking I'd hear anything back, right? I didn't know I'd suddenly gained another employee. Congratulations. I hope this doesn't mean I've got to pay you a salary after not even interviewing you. And I just made like a jokey message to them, and they actually responded back, and they were like, oh, haha, you caught me. And so I don't know what the end game is for this, but like my company is like 7 people, right? So I'm going to notice an extra person.
Yeah, I hope you don't plan on listing me on
Yeah,
your
yeah,
references list,
exactly.
because
I
I'm
was
not
like,
going to give you a good reference.
I tell you,
Yeah, and that's another good point too, is if you're a hiring manager getting references from people, call them, see if they're legit. If you know somebody at a company listed and potentially in that team that they may have been working on, particularly if it's a small company. Like the defense industry that I'm in is a big industry, but the defense tech world is pretty small. So if we start seeing people that work from other companies, I won't even actually reach out to their references. I'll back channel to see, if somebody else knew them or knew of them or can verify in their company system that that person even exists. That's a great thing to do. But to your point, some people are just putting companies, listing them in their LinkedIn experience that don't exist. And LinkedIn's got some really good reporting mechanisms for that you can go report their profile. I think like misleading or whatever the options are, kind of follow the workflow through. Whenever we see that, we drop it in our, we have a fun incident reporting channel, and we like to just send a whole bunch of people to go report that as fraudulent, and LinkedIn will get 10 or 20 submissions that this profile is fraudulent or misleading, and they take it down pretty quick.
yeah, easier to kick it out when it's not just one person. But
Yeah.
yeah, I get all the usual spams. Hi, hi are you? How are you? And all the usual bits and pieces that you get, messages that are not remotely that are moving then on to, let's speak on a different channel, or those kind of things. So I see a lot of those. Yeah, it's interesting times. I know I would love your opinion on what somebody could do, as an individual, if you could give a one piece of advice. I know I've got my own thoughts on it, but yeah, absolutely. What would you recommend to people that are worried about this? What can they be doing?
Well, I definitely think it's a risk worth tracking and looking into what you want to mitigate for. Your recruiting team or your recruiters that are the first gateway to people coming into your company are absolutely your first line of defense, and make sure that they're aware of the different red flags and that this is an issue to begin with that they need to be looking out for. I think if you're using a recruiting agency, you kind of give up a little bit of control over that. So I would
Hmm.
say definitely be wary of that and quantify that risk. And if you are using a recruiting agency, ask what they're doing to help mitigate this, and make sure that they're filtering those candidates out so that they don't make their way into your company, because that's letting one of these fraudulent workers into your company is just a huge insider threat risk for not only just paying people for work that they're probably not really doing, but the data exfiltration risk is huge as well. So keep that in mind, and awareness is key here.
Yeah, I think so. It actually goes hand in hand with some of the issues that people are having out there recruiting right now, right? So their problem is that AI has helped people apply to a lot more jobs. So people that are putting out adverts are getting 1,000, 1,500 replies in 24, 48 hours, right? It's just unbelievable amounts of people that aren't always qualified, in fact, rarely qualified, and it's hard to find the good people out of those anyway. And I think if you then post a remote job, which are the ones that these particular people are most interested in, because you're not going to necessarily have somebody turn up on site doing it, then the issue you've got there is that the amount of people applying it exponentially goes up from there. And so I think a lot of the recruitment that I see happening, if you're using a recruitment company, of course, I'm very biased, but use a specialist that is relying on their network rather than on advertising, right? You'll see that we have very few roles advertised. The way we fill most of our positions are from recommendations. So who do we know that does this type of work? Are they looking? Who do they know? And that way people know people. So, you're not going to get the same volume of applications, or then we're not going to send you the same volume of people, but the people you are going to get have been qualified, their quality, and they've been recommended by somebody who's willing to put their own neck on the line, their own reputation for that, which is obviously great if you've got the budget to do that. If you haven't got the budget to use a recruitment company, then same way, like, who are your referrals? Like, who are your people internally that what network do they have? Really making the most of that, so it's people that we actually know that you're looking to hire, rather than just a stranger that's applying to a job, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like with the role I'm hiring for right now, that was a huge difference, is those first and second or connections from either LinkedIn or people that already worked for us or people that we knew who are willing to vouch for somebody else. Like, just to your point, the volume of applications is for a hiring manager, for recruiters that are hiring 10 plus roles at a time. It's impossible to sift through every single resume. So you kind of lean on keywords a little bit, but more than anything, you lean on that referral network. And yes, I'm willing to vouch for this person and put my reputation on the line and say they're a good fit for your role or they would be great to work with you. Leaning on that network is huge.
Lovely. Well, look, thank you so much, Alexis. I know we've gone a little bit over our time. It's a bit more than a bite-sized episode. Our listeners and watchers are very lucky. They get a little bit extra on this one. So thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been fun. Thanks, Kris.
You're welcome. And thank you for all the listeners. Of course, we'll have another episode out next Tuesday. Thank you for joining us, and make sure you like, subscribe, do all of the good stuff, comment. Let me know if there's anybody else or any other subjects we should be chatting about. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Route to CISO Byte-Size podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you keep an eye out for season 3 of the full Route to CISO podcast. And in the meantime, stay up to date by liking, commenting, and of course, subscribing to our channel. Thank you.